Welcome back, everyone, to a Victoria 2 mod spotlight. And as you probably have seen from the title, as you can hear and see, it's Cold War time. Now, unlike a lot of other mods that I've looked at, this mod I've actually played it, so I know how it is. Oh wow, they have a T-34 model. Impressive. So essentially, Victoria 2 Cold War Extended is, or extension maybe, is obviously a mod about, well, period roughly undergoing the, second half of the 20th century, although it's supposed to have content running all the way up to the modern day, if we take a look at. In fact, even into the future, apparently. If we take a look at the tech tree, we can see that it goes all the way up to like 2070 or whatever. 4th generation tanks. 5th generation warfare is a thing that's already a thing, as far as I know. I'm not too up to date on this stuff, but yes, full spectrum dominance is definitely a thing that's already existing. Space warfare is definitely a thing that's already existing. Anyway, so apparently in the year 2020 we have just invented modern asymmetric warfare. Okay. So yeah, as you can see, and we're apparently only 10 years away from 6th generation jet fighters, which is, I reckon, what most analysts think. Anyway, so the world is basically just entering the post-World War II period, and it's Victoria 2, so you know what's coming. It's a massive game of influence on a global scale and of economic dominance and political intrigue. Now the problem is, I'm gonna go right away ahead and say it, there's very, very little in terms of cool political stuff that you can do, at least as the countries that I played as, which were Republic of China, Argentina, Egypt, and maybe I had a game as something else like a million years ago, but these are the countries that I played within my memory, so within like the last year or two or so. I've never played as the USSR, or as the US, or as France, or as the UK, or as Japan, so any of like the great powers that you think of, not even Italy. So because of that, my view may be kind of skewed, but like okay, so just from normal game mechanics, Victoria 2 obviously doesn't really offer like a lot, except, obviously just influencing nation and invading nations to really like change the political layouts of other people. But of course, there's a ton of decisions that you can employ. Anyway, so the base game plays pretty much like normal Victoria 2, and it works just fine. You influence people and you make them your little bitch. So that's about it. Obviously, the map is changed and it looks quite good, but you notice that there's a lot of colonial stuff. So just like in normal Victoria 2, you have a mechanic where essentially you have colonial conquest progressively happening across the globe. This is the opposite. There's the decolonization. There's a ton of decolonization events and even some decisions. Not sure if we can. No, we probably cannot see that as the USSR. Let's see if we can tag over United Kingdom and see if we can see anything about decolonization right away. Although, oh, okay, yeah, there's a lot of decisions. I love the Franco-British Union. So if you're allied with France and you're at war, and France is getting destroyed, you can annex France. Amazing. Embark on a wonder weapon program. Lovely. Wonder Waffe program in action. How lovely. Yeah, you can make the EU and all that. No, I want to see about decolonization. No, whatever. Who cares? I don't give a shit. So as you can see, you can already see one of the problems of this mod is that there's so many decisions. See, this is not even like just a problem. It's both a problem and Wait, you're telling me that's Russ? Sure. So it's both a problem and something that's good. There's a ton of decisions in this mod, and also, as you can see, like a ton of events. There's also a ton of modifiers, as you can see up here. And this. See, you may think that this is a lot, right? But bro, you do not know. Like, modifiers get like progressively, like there's progressively more modifiers that appear throughout the game, because every time you click a decision or something, so if I want to develop chemical weapons, I click a button, and that's gonna give me developing chemical weapons, and then when it's done, it's gonna give me a you have chemical weapons, chemical warfare capable nations. So it's always pretty difficult actually to see your modifiers and what they do, because sometimes there's so many that you cannot literally see. So I kind of wish that there was a different UI. I'm not even sure if this is possible in Victoria 2, but it would be great if there was a different UI, or a, like, I don't know, something that you could see to see your modifiers a little bit better. So like a window that you could pop up. It's probably impossible in Victoria 2 because Victoria 2 GUI, I know, is pretty restrictive, but who knows. And again, same thing for the UI. See, it's not even a problem. Yes, it's not a problem that there's a lot of decisions. There's a problem that the UI is really, really not up to the task of just the sheer amount of stuff that you can do with these decisions. And the decisions are obviously supposed to represent all the, you know, things that you're expecting a modern country to be able to do that normal Victoria 2 doesn't really concern itself with, like trade blocks, you know, Eurasian defense community, which are like the super states. Basically, most countries in the world are part of a essentially a region, and every country in that region can form a super state, except I think China is like basically the only region in the world. China and India are like the only regions in the world that don't have like a super entity that they can form, because of course they're already, like, China and India are already super entities. And USSR has Eurasia, which I think capital is a Eurasia core. Where is it? Leningrad to St. Petersburg, really now. Eurasian Economic Union. You need to have invented modern neoliberalism, so that takes a while. Actually, can I see like a region map mode? See, it says Europe, it says Asia. I don't know exactly what Eurasia would be, but definitely Mongolia and maybe some Western countries. Anyway, there's also, like, obviously, so there's Eurasia for the Soviet Union that you can form, and essentially the way that you form it is by having all the countries that are supposed to be a part of it in your sphere, right? Or maybe with like really, really high relations. I like how you can join the EU as Russia. Amazing. So yeah, having them in your sphere or your puppet, and having a few texts researched with sometimes, or like globalization, you know, even sometimes the age of protests. If you take a look at, like, for example, Egypt, we can see that they can form essentially the Arab Union or United Arabia. Really now, you're not gonna show me the block. Yeah, you might be thinking it's the United Arab Republic, but it's another thing. I suppose you have to embrace Pan-Arabism first. How annoying. Saudi Arabia actually has the Ummah, which is pretty hilarious, and also the Gulf Union, the Gulf Council. So, you know, capital have the modifier part of the Defense Union and the Gulf Cooperation Council. So, you know, if people have accepted to be in the Gulf Cooperation Council, which is up here, join the Gulf Community, and then the Gulf Cooperation Monetary Union, Gulf Cooperation Market, you know, so you have to be, as you can see there, you have to have Arab primary culture. And then you can, I love the economic autarky, and then you can just annex them, which is pretty cool. That's that, essentially. There's also like United South America, I think a United North America too. Maybe that's basically the USA. Maybe it's NAFTA. Release vassal decisions. It's always pretty difficult to see exactly what's going on because of all the crap. Yeah, NAFTA ambitions. Huh. Amazing. North American single market. Join the North American community. North American Union will gain all its core. Huh. Capital have the province modifier, currency unions, commodity. See, like for example, to form NAFTA, you need to have commodities and speculations, which is down here. Oh well, by 2007 you can form NAFTA. Amazing. So I'm guessing you can annex Mexico as well. Then there's a South American one. What do you mean BRA is not Brazil? What the fuck are you talking about? Interesting. There is definitely a South American one, which is the Mercosur Union. And I believe there's also the African Union, but obviously, you know, at the start, no African countries except South Africa. No, that's the US, sorry. SAU. What? SAF, yes. Maybe we can see United Africa from there. The Southern African Community. Formed the new Southern African Union. Oh, wow. Okay, so apparently there's a South African Union. What is that? That's Anglo-African, Portuguese African, Shona, Chewa. Shona and Chewa. I wonder what the hell those cultures are. But I'm guessing it's something like this. Anyway, there's also an African Union. Maybe Ethiopia can tell us something about that. What? I always hate how you have to... Oh, okay. Apparently I'm dumb. Ethiopian access to the East African Union. Oh, it's okay. So they have like a lot of regional African unions. So anyway, you get the deal. If you're becoming like a great power or a secondary power, some unions need great power status, some don't. I think you do not necessarily need to be a great power, for example, for like the East African Union. Let's see. One of the following must be true. Ethiopia is a great power or a secondary power. I've invented political polarization. So either is in the sphere of influence as a puppet or have the East African Federation ambitions. So then you just have clicked this. Okay, I see. Yeah, so basically in the late game you can have really, really cool like mega blocks forming. Anyway, that's nothing for the early and mid game though. For the early mid game you're gonna be wrestling with a lot of essentially military modernization stuff, but especially a lot of economics. Now, economics in this mod are complex. Yeah, there's obviously, you know, all the techs are very well done in my opinion, but there's just a slight problem with economics. If we go take a look at trade, you can see that there's a shitload of trade goods. And obviously that's meant to represent, you know, how economies get very, very diversified. But I'm not entirely sure that, like, the balancing is done for this mod. Even though it's been in development for a shitload of years, obviously. It's just such a daunting task that it's quite difficult to... It's quite difficult to really wrap your head around the economics, and it's also very, very difficult to know how to balance this stuff, because oftentimes for a lot of goods, and I'm not talking about like, you know, goats or whatever, I'm talking about like industrial goods, advanced goods, like plastics. Like, for example, if we take a look at, I'm just gonna let the game run for, oh, the Sovietization of Bulgaria, sure. Hero City, Leningrad. Yeah, there's a ton of events. Military support for Indonesia, sure. So there's also a UN Security Council mechanic, but it's not really all that important. Thank you, Yugoslavia. I will take an alliance. Okay, so we have a month. So the supply and demand have updated. Like, for example, if we take a look at, like, heating and electricity, quite important, because if we take a look at, like, factories and shit. Also, I love how there's, like, no factories in the Soviet Union. Oh, but there are some. If you take a look at factories, like, except, you know, the very, very obvious, like, you know, textile industry, you know, light industries. If we take a look at cooler industries, actually, what the fuck? See, it's not telling me that you need electricity, but I'm 95% sure you need electricity for a lot of this stuff. So, like, for example, to run my television factory, I'd need other other minerals, fuel, machine parts, electric gears, optics, and heating and electricity. So if we go take a look at some of these goods in the trade, we can see that, like, for example, electricity, the supply is 657 and the demand is 1,000. And it gets worse because a ton of countries are going to spawn and a ton of countries are going to start to industrialize. So also machine parts. Machine parts is like the only good in normal Victoria 2 that has the same problem where, like, essentially most factories in the world need this good to run, but generally the AI is pretty bad at building factories to produce that good. So anyway, if you can, like, game the system, I'm sure you can, like, get massive profits from it. But as it stands, it's sometimes quite annoying if you're, like, a smallish country like, you know, Egypt, or I'm guessing something like Korea, or even Yugoslavia or Greece, and you're trying to industrialize and essentially, like, you know, you run out of electric gears, which is something that did happen to me, because, like, you know, a ton of factories need electric gears, and there's just not enough electric gears in the world for you to either build or maintain those factories. And then, like, maybe you build your electric gear factory, but then the electric gear factory requires electricity and there's not enough electricity in the world. And if you want to build an electricity factory, you need electric gears and there's not enough electric gears. And there's not enough electric gears because your electric gear factory does not have enough electricity to produce electric gears. So you cannot produce your electricity factory to produce your electric gears, and it's just a vicious cycle. But anyway, that's just something that I've encountered. There's, you know, all the other obvious Victoria 2 stuff, like the politics. There's a ton of different types of parties. There's actually a lot more than in normal whatchamacallit. Normal Victoria 2. Sorry, I'm dumb. So there's nationalists, which are basically, like, you know, your good old semi-fascists, essentially. Moderates or centrists, which are, you know, liberals, essentially. There's also liberals. Conservatives, obviously. Liberals. Quote-unquote socialists, which is mostly, like, you know, all the sort of third world kind of state first, you know, industrializing, social reforming regimes, like, you know, Nasserist Egypt, or fucking whatchamacallit, like Allende in Chile, I'm guessing is supposed to be called socialist. Actually, socialist is also like social democrats in Europe, like SFIO. So yeah, it's kind of just a big tent of a lot of stuff. There's progressive. It's just something I kind of despise, how there's like all these fucking different ideologies, because it makes the ideology chart quite weird. But honestly, most of these ideologies don't really do a lot of damage because they're not going to get a lot of traction. Unless you're like specific countries that have heavy modifiers towards one of these ideologies getting popular, or events that make them get into power, they're not going to be annoying you that much. Then there's populists. Now, populists are pretty hilarious because they're basically like, you know, modern definition of populists, you know. Like, for example, Perón in Argentina, there's going to be there's a lot of historical events, and, you know, the Peronist coup or whatever, the Peronist takeover in Argentina is pretty hilarious because then you become populist. And populists have some cool policies like state capitalism and jingoism generally. So yeah, and in fact, a lot of decisions that allow you to do really, really cool things, you know, like really, really cool things like becoming general secretary for life, require you to be a certain kind of ideology. Actually, no, that does not require you to have that. Denazification. Lift the Soviet Iron Current. Current government is market socialist. Amazing. Yeah, so as you can see, some really, really cool decisions require you to have either policies or ideologies. So, like, for example, if you're like a shitty country with no social reforms and you want a ton of social reforms, you can just click that once you're either communist socialist or market socialist. Now, obviously, there is also market socialist, which is dangest, and that's amazing. And then there's also traditionalists, which are basically like traditionalists are literally like you know, religious fundamentalists. So as you can see, like down here in Saudi Arabia, you have the Wahhabists. In Egypt, you have the Muslim Brotherhood in power at the beginning, and they're traditionalist. So that's that. They have more, and also the like reactionary parties in this are actually reactionary and allow you to like roll back political reforms when the upper house is controlled by them, which is quite cool. It's not something I generally ever see in Victoria to be doable. Oh, gulags, amazing. Now, one other thing, actually, no, let's talk about other stuff. No, let's talk about this, because the social reforms are sort of reworked, but they're mostly just the same stuff. Movements is the same. Releasable nations is the same. There's obviously more of them. But if we take a look at like decisions, there's some very, very quote-unquote edgy things, like developing chemical weapons. You can also develop, where is it? Atomic weapons. And you can do ethnic cleansing. So yeah, you know, there's a lot of edgy stuff in this mod, which is, I suppose, kind of cool. Because, you know, might as well. Now, there are two problems with these decisions. It's great that there's so many of them. Socialism with Soviet characteristics, market socialism. Have invented market socialism and have invented the internet. Soviet market socialism, so cursed. Where do you invent even market socialism? Yeah, see, this is exactly what we're talking about. Beijing consensus. So what I was gonna say is that there's two problems with these awesome decisions that do so many cool things. One is that you're never really, it's really, really difficult for a game like Victoria 2 to really explain well how, like, what the requirements are. Because as you can see, like, this is, like, look at this shit. How the fuck am I supposed to know, like, exactly, you know, what, see, this is, it's like, it's barely, you know, translated from coder speak with, like, you know, parentheses and, like, either or, and, you know, do this if that, do not do this if that other thing, you know, XYZ, into English. It's not easy to understand the requirements for something. It's not easy to understand what something is gonna do outside of what it tells you, because it's gonna do more things. Like, every one of these decisions probably has events that require that, you know, decision. Some of them require text to even show up, and you don't even see them at the beginning. And the texts do not really explain that this is the case. I'm trying to think of, for example, something that I am 90% sure that I've seen. Shit. I'm dumb. Oh yeah, for example, like this is a pretty like dumb one because you can probably understand it. But like if you discovered the IBRD and the World Bank, you can join the IBRD and the World Bank, and that's gonna give your nation some bonuses when it comes to essentially taxes, finance, all that kind of stuff, and also diplomatic relations. But like, how the fuck am I supposed to know from allows discovery of IBRD that's gonna give me plus 1% tax efficiency that that's gonna also unlock a decision for me to join the IBRD or the World Bank, and then that decision is a prerequisite to maybe some other decision to, like, I don't know. This is all pretty fucking esoteric, you know? You need to try a lot of things for you to know exactly what to do in this mod. It's never really clear, like, you know, explaining to you what you can actually do well and how to do it. It's difficult to really wrap yourself around it until you've played it, though. So I'm not even gonna get too far into it. Now, the second thing that is kind of annoying about this decision system is that, again, like, it's really, really difficult to navigate. And honestly, what I think should be done is that, like, there are some decisions actually that are well made in this regard. Like, for example, look at this, export economy. This will greatly increase popular promotion to blue-collar workers. How the fuck am I supposed to know that from the tooltip? But it's telling me in the description. There's a lot of descriptions actually that you know, tell you that something's gonna happen that's not really clear. But then there's also a lot of decisions that do not tell you. Like, for example, with the propaganda campaign over here, you get, like, the general secretary speech. What the fuck is that supposed to mean? Can you tell me, like, in the description with, like, a yellow text, this is gonna give you the option to do this and this and that? It would be so great. Or even, like, for example, like, oh no, this one's pretty understandable. It gives stockpiles to some people. Yeah, that's basically about it. Now, there was another thing. Yeah, like, for example, when your country goes to war, there's a ton of other decisions that pop up with things like war rationing, like drafts, you know, war propaganda, a ton of shit. And in those decisions, the game is really, really good, or whoever, you know, wrote those events is really, really good at explaining you with a nice highlighted text below the description exactly what effects are going to happen because of this that are not really well explained by the tooltip. And it's like, oh god, can't everything be like this? Anyway, so basically to like play this mod correctly, you'd need, like, either to have played it a million times and to know what everything does, or you'd need a guide. That's my main gripe with this mod. It's really, really difficult to understand what to do, not because it's like rocket science or anything. It's like, you know, even with like a lot of the economy stuff, it's like, oh yes, of course, it's great to build the fucking electricity plants because all of my fucking economy is gonna require that. Like, after you play a couple of times and you run your industry into the ground because you have no electricity, you understand that. Same thing with, like, I think there's something called, like, financial goods that is really, really strong later on, and also the transportation goods, transportation services goods. You know, there's just some goods that make your economy run so much better than, you know, it normally does. Like, the first time you play, your economy is shit, and you're like, what the fuck is going on? Then you realize that, oh, I need to build the electricity plants, and I need to build, like, the transportation factory, you know, the transportation services, and then everything runs okay. And it's like, okay, nice. Once, obviously, the AI gets its shit together and builds its own factories. But, you know, that generally tends to happen regardless. But, like, with all the political decisions and all the, like, social decisions and, like, holy shit, should I do concentration camps? What the fuck is that gonna do, you know? See, like, it tells you it's gonna lose 10 prestige, but, like, at least 500 K-pops in the Soviet Union, concentration camps. What the fuck is that gonna do, you know? So is it gonna do other things? Chemical weapons. What the fuck is chemical weapons gonna do? Can I use them? I don't fucking know, you know? And then there's like a lot of hidden scripts. So like, for example, if, let's take a look at, actually, I'm gonna show you a game that's been going on for a while. Just to sort of close this video by showing you what the mod can accomplish. So basically, you have that when, for example, a superpower gets destroyed in a war, and there's obviously always two superpowers. The second greatest power becomes the second superpower. It's weird. When one of the two gets destroyed, there's like a end of Cold War script that runs a bunch of events that make a whole bunch of bad stuff happen for said superpower. So like, for example, in here, the Soviet Union lost, and this because, I don't know, one thing that's really, really weird is that the Soviet Union really, really likes going over the infamy limit, because I'm guessing they have a lot of options to take things that give them a lot of infamy. So the United States tends to invade the Soviet Union really, really early on and destroy them, which is kind of a sad thing. Probably they destroy them really, really easily also because at the beginning they have nukes and the Soviet Union does not, so they nuke the Soviet Union. I don't know. Yeah, like for example, Leningrad has 800,000 people. I'm pretty sure that place got its ass nuked. I don't know. There's nukes in the mod. You can like click button and it nukes people. And you can use chemical weapons. You can even use biological weapons, which is really, really cool. I have a story from this particular playthrough. Now, I'm not this good. I'm not as good as it looks. I know it looks like I'm really good. Oh, look, you formed the United Arab Republic. I cheated to do it because there's a reason for it. It's really, really difficult to get people to make Arab their primary culture while they are your neighbors, because there's two ways in which, like, there's two things that need to happen for you to form the United Arab Republic. People need to be your neighbor, which also includes C zones if like Syria, you know, one C zone and all that. And for example, Yemen, as you can see, one C zone, they're your neighbor. And they need to have Arab as their primary culture. But like, for example, if I take a look at Jordan, their population is Levantine, and not Arab primary culture. So what they need to do is they need to take a decision to embrace Pan-Arabism. And if they're not like nationalist or socialist or a few other ideologies, they're never gonna do it. So that's always kind of dumb. So I just kind of did a bit of a cheat to, well, have an election happen in Palestine because there was like a socialist majority, but they weren't doing elections, they weren't winning for some reason, so I did that and I cheated and, you know, I formed the United Arab Republic with Palestine and Yemen, which is quite cool. So anyway, what happens, going back to like the superpower capitulation thing, what happens is that like all of their puppets and spherelings get taken away from them. Now the spherelings, they can get them back. Like for example, if you take a look at the sphere of influence map mode, you can see that like a lot of spherelings got taken back by the USSR. But one of their puppets becomes the United Nations Trust Territory and then puppets all the other puppets. Hilariously, in this campaign, the United Nations Trust Territory was the Soviet administration of Manchuria. So for a while, like all the Eastern Bloc countries were puppeted by the United Nations Trust Territory of Manchuria. Then something broke with the Chinese Civil War and they made a white peace. And then the Soviet Union lost another war to the, essentially the US coalition, which included the United Nations Trust Territory over here. And they lost like a few random provinces. So like, I don't know, like normally, organically in Victoria 2, this shit would never happen, but there's a lot of events and weird shit that can happen that's gonna make the world look interesting. Also, why is Austria getting invaded by pro-democracy rebels? Because they're a nationalist dictatorship. Okay, so Austria went fascist, and now they're getting pro-democracy rebels. Amazing. Also, look at this. Big Yugoslavia. I'm not sure how the fuck this happened. So there's a lot of cool shit that can happen in this mod. It's just really, really difficult to actually do it. Because sometimes the requirements are very, very esoteric. And that's my take on the mod so far. Now, the other part that's really, really kind of dumb, honestly, is the military. But, I mean, it's Victoria too. You know military is not going to be all that great. If you want something, like, well done with the military, go play Hoi 4 or something. Although, to be fair, the AI in this is sometimes better than Hoi 4. The AI can be quite aggressive. Like, they can do some nasty naval invasions, and they build a shitload, like a metric shitload of units. Like, if you take a look at, for example, India right now, they have 400 brigades. Half of China has 200 brigades. PRC is being dumb. Fucking Korea has 80 brigades. Japan has 200 brigades. Soviet Union has 174, which is pretty shitty, but that's because they just lost a massive war to the US, you know? Germany has 63. France has 29, but that's because they are kind of being dumb. They also had a war with Germany. USA, 0. What? Interesting. That's pretty hilarious. But yeah, like, the AI is pretty good at doing military stuff. At least in terms of, like, macro play. In terms of managing armies, they're pretty terrible. Like, the AI really, really loves doing big stacks because that's actually a good idea, because if you take a look at the military stats, just very, very quickly, combat width is 31. That means you can have 30 brigades in the combat width. So, like, that means, like, what, 90,000 soldiers in the front line in a single province. So you can understand that if you were to really, like, fill up all your provinces with troops, yeah, it would take a lot of troops. So I don't know, and supply limit is really, really, for some reason, massive. So I don't know. The military system can be kind of dumb. So you can have, like, hundreds of thousands of people running across the desert. I don't know. But obviously, you know, it's Victoria 2, so options are quite limited. There's a ton of different units. There's even airplanes, which are basically replacing artillery. They're in the back row in the combat. There's light infantry, heavy infantry for infantry. And then there's cavalry, which are basically tanks. Must discover guerrilla to build heavy infantry. Are you sure? And yeah, and then there's, like, attack helicopters, you know, combat support, which are basically CAS. Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what you'd expect as a whole. There's even fucking strategic bombers. I'm not sure why they'd exist, but yeah, there's, like, a support stat. I'm not sure what it does. You know, don't really understand it too much, but it's honestly kind of easy to beat the AI because it's basically like normal Victoria. Like, it's all pretty intuitive over here. That's the thing. It's kind of dumb, but it's also very intuitive. So you can work around this. Anyway, that's gonna be it for Mr. Not Millennium Dawn, but Cold War extension. So yeah, do try it. I'll leave the links, the necessary ones, as always. So I want to thank you all for watching. Hope you've enjoyed. And I'll see you soon.